Hi, and welcome back. Apparently, at the start of these things, I meant to ask you guys to like and subscribe. So, if you like them and subscribe, there's a button, I think, down there somewhere. So, go ahead and press it. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at turning left and right from major roads into minor roads, what some people quite often call turning into a side road on either the left or the right. We'll look at left turns first, go and do a couple of examples, and then we'll have a talk through turning right as well. In a later video, we'll then look at emerging from minor roads into major roads, which is a different way around of doing things. Okay, so turning left from a major into a minor. Okay, now generally on a driving lesson I will give you a prompt which will be I'd like you to take the next road on the left or take the next turning on the left, and at about this point it's usually kind of 100-120 yards or so from the junction, and generally that's a good time to crack on and get started with your approach routine. Bear in mind, however, that if you are following a sat nav, the first prompt that you'll get from a sat nav, certainly sort of in an urban area where your speed limit's say 30 miles an hour, quite often they will give you the first prompt will be in 300 yards, turn left. Now, if you're doing sort of 25 mile an hour or so, that's quite an early instruction. It's really just a bit of a heads up to say you're going to be turning left shortly. So start scanning the road ahead, looking out for that junction, and if you can't see it, just ease off the gas a little bit, give yourself a bit more time. But actually, if you start signalling at that 300 yard marker, you can find that you're actually signalling for quite some time, and that could potentially be confusing to other drivers or other road users. You'll generally get a second instruction, which would be a little bit more direct. It would just simply say turn left, and that's usually again at about that 100-120 yard mark. So that's a good kind of marker point for when to really make sure that you start your routine. So what is the routine for approaching to turn left from a major to a minor? First thing you've got to do, obviously, is to check your mirrors. So you check your centre and your left mirror. Now generally, if you're driving, you should be checking your centre mirror quite regularly anyway. So this final check, or this second check, is really just to confirm what's coming up behind you and how close they are. But your left mirror check is really, we're looking out for particularly cyclists and people that might be weaving up along the inside of you. Now in the normal run of things, if you are driving at a reasonable speed around town, it's unlikely that you're going to find a cyclist going that fast that he's undertaking you on the left hand side. However, if you're sitting in traffic, maybe at rush hour, or if you're waiting at some traffic lights, particularly at a crossroads, it is entirely possible that when you check that mirror that you find you can see there's a cyclist just on your left hand side. And at this point you've got a little bit of a decision to make as to whether to signal or not. Now if the cyclist is literally sitting just behind you on your bumper, you may make the decision that actually it's probably going to be safer for you and for the cyclist just to hold off on that signal and allow the cyclist to come up past you, so he kind of undertakes you and it gets him out of the way, minimises any potential risk of you turning across the road in front of him. So potentially just hold off on that signal, wait till he's gone, wait till he's out of the way. If you notice that there's a cyclist, but you consider he's far enough back that actually if you were to put a signal on, it should give him plenty of time to spot your signal and respond to it, and hopefully slow down himself and allow you to make that turn, then fine, pop your signal on. But do remember, before you make that final turn, just have another final check just to make sure that he has heeded your signal and is holding back while you make the turn, and we'll remind you about that later on. Once you've checked your mirrors and you've decided that it's safe to put your signal on, straight away just pop that signal on, get it going, give people plenty of time to notice your indicator. Once you've done that, ideally what I recommend you to do is straight away bring your right foot over to your brake and your left foot over to your clutch. Now in your early lessons you may well just be going quite slowly anyway, and you may not find that you actually need to brake particularly in order to achieve a reasonable speed for the junction. However, as you get more experience and you're driving around at higher speeds, you will need to make sure that you get onto that brake nice and promptly, so you give yourself plenty of time to squeeze the brake and slow your car down. So check your mirrors, signal left, start to squeeze your brake, and have your left foot covering your clutch pedal. You should feel the car slowing down, and really what you're looking to do is get down to around about 20 miles an hour or so. And this should be not at the junction, but 3-4 car lengths away from the junction itself. And this allows you to have plenty of time once you're down to down to 20 miles an hour, just to drop down into second gear. And remember, at that point, make sure you bring the clutch back up again. A lot of novice drivers worry possibly that if they bring the clutch back up, actually they feel that the car's then going to accelerate. And so in order to avoid that, they keep the clutch down as a bit of a sort of safety valve. And actually, what happens is completely the opposite. When you bring your clutch back up, you'll feel the engine braking coming back in, and that helps to slow the car down even more on the approach to the junction. And it means that when you arrive at the junction, your clutch is up and you have full control of your car before you make the turn. So it's really important to make sure you bring that clutch up so that we're not coasting as we go around the corner. At that point, it's highly likely you're probably then going to need to just continue gently braking a little bit more, because 20 miles an hour can be a little bit fast to be going around these corners. So I usually recommend just allow that speed to come down a little bit further, so that you're doing at roughly 10 miles an hour by the time you get to the junction itself. And as you approach the junction, you're just bringing that speed down to 10 miles an hour. You're now really scanning the junction itself to make sure that it's safe for you to make the turn. So one of our main potential problems is going to be pedestrians. So if you see that there are pedestrians approaching the junction and you're thinking to yourself, oh, they might cross, they might not, keep those pedals covered so that you're prepared to stop if necessary. Now, we'd obviously hope that any pedestrian would have a bit of a look round first before they step into the road, but as we know, quite often people will just walk straight out without looking, so you need to be ready to stop if they do. And obviously if there's somebody already in the middle of crossing the road, then clearly we're going to stop and allow them to continue their journey. So we brake to a stop with the clutch down, into first gear, and then just be ready to move off again once they've completed their crossing. Before we make the turn, as we mentioned earlier, just have a final check on that left mirror before you start to steer across and come around the corner. You really want to make sure that you're not going to turn across the path of any cyclist that's coming up on your left hand side. It's always worth, as well as you're approaching, have a look into the road itself. Get as much early warning as you can of the conditions in the road. Are there any parked cars that I'm going to need to move around? What's my view down the road like? You know, potentially, is there going to be any oncoming traffic as I turn the corner that I might need to deal with? Assuming all is well, we're going to take our car nice and smoothly around the corner. At this point, really, we shouldn't be braking anymore. We've got the speed down as slow as we want it to be, so just ease off that brake. But similarly, don't go back onto the gas pedal too early. Just keep your feet off the pedal so the car just rolls smoothly around the corner. And as you straighten up, have a check in your centre mirror. It's always worth checking because there might be somebody who's followed you into the road, particularly a motorcyclist, who, as he comes around the corner, notices that the road ahead is clear and moves around you looking to overtake. So you just want to be aware of that before you start to then accelerate up into third gear and off you go. Okay, so let's go and have a look at a couple of examples. Okay, so I'm taking the next turning on the left. It's just coming up after the last tree. So I'm checking centre and left mirrors and signalling left. Starting to brake, bringing that speed down. Second gear now, well before the junction, and clutch up. Looking for pedestrians and other dangers and cyclists. And then just turning in, having a look ahead. I've got a nice clear view as we come in, but again, approaching the corner here, can't see very well, so just keeping to the left, keeping that speed down, thanks to that fella. Parked cars, so just moving across, having a look ahead, and accelerating into third. Okay, we're going to take the next road on the left, so again, centre and left mirrors, signal left, it's using the brakes to slow down to about 20, change to second gear and clutch up. Just coming back in, checking it's safe, checking the left mirror again. You can see there's a park car, so keeping it slow as I turn in to look ahead, and then as we come around, checking behind before I gently accelerate away. Okay, so that's turning left from a major to a minor, and now we're going to have a look at turning right, so again from a major to a minor. The approach routine is almost exactly the same, obviously, but with a couple of important changes that we need to be aware of. So, take the next road on the right. First thing you're going to do, check that centre mirror, check your right mirror, and obviously this time again on that right hand mirror, we're just making sure before we start signalling, we're making sure there's no motorbikes or any other vehicles that are in the process or are about to overtake us before we put our signal on. Just making sure that it's going to be safe to make that right turn. But assuming it is safe, again, pop your right hand signal on, bring your right foot to the brake so you can start slowing your car down, bring your left foot over to the clutch so you're ready for your gear change. Again, we're looking to bring that speed down to about 20 miles an hour before we change into second. This time actually, we're going to alter our road position very slightly if it's safe to do so. So generally, if we can, we're going to move slightly more towards the centre of the road. We say if it's safe to do so, because obviously if we move across towards the centre, we want to make sure that we're not going to be potentially obstructing or running the risk of any kind of collision with oncoming traffic. But by moving over towards the centre, it minimises the amount of distance we have to cover when we do make the right turn. But also potentially, if the road itself is wide enough, it will allow a passage down the left hand side of us, down our passenger side, for any traffic coming up behind us that doesn't want to turn right but possibly doesn't want to be held up by sitting behind us. So if we can leave enough room for them to get past, it just allows traffic to flow through more easily. Again, as we're approaching the junction, we're looking to bring that speed down to 20 miles an hour well before we arrive at the junction, so we can get ourselves into second gear. Again, bring that clutch back up again, and then continue to use your brake a little bit to slow down on that final approach. Again, as we're approaching, we're looking at the junction itself for any potential dangers there. Again, it's those pedestrians that might be crossing the road. We're having a bit of an early look in so we can get us a view of the conditions in the road. How big is it? How wide is it? Is there any parked cars or obstructions we need to deal with? But our major problem here potentially is going to be oncoming traffic, because clearly if we want to make it turn into that road on the right, we have to cross the path of anything coming towards us. Now if we look at the junction, or if we look at the road ahead and we decide, okay, there's nobody coming towards us, or if they are coming towards us, they're far enough away that we can make that turn nice and safely without making them have to slow down, then fine, stay in second gear, and as long as it's still safe, make the turn and away we go. If, however, you look at the oncoming traffic and you think, okay, I'm definitely going to have to stop here, there's no way I can make that turn safely without making them slow down or stop, then we need ourselves obviously to be prepared to stop, which is why our feet are still over the brake and clutch. So we're going to brake, clutch goes down, select first gear, and then whilst you're waiting, just get your feet ready to go. So have your gas humming away, bring your clutch up to your biting point so you're at that prepared position. If you need to, you can pop your handbrake on if you want that for a bit of security, if it's going to stop you from rolling forwards or even backwards, and then sit and wait patiently for a gap in the traffic and a safe point to turn. Now, a few things just to think about here. If you are sitting and waiting for oncoming traffic, just remember to keep a good eye on what's going on around you, because remember initially you might have checked your mirrors, you've seen that there's nobody overtaking me, but whilst you're sat in the middle of the road there, it is possible that a cyclist could come up around the outside of you. Even though you are signalling to turn right, some cyclists or even motorbike riders will still try to overtake you whilst you're sitting there waiting. So just make sure you keep a bit of an eye out there. Keep an eye out for any other pedestrians that might be approaching and looking to cross the road whilst you're waiting. Now the other thing to consider here is where would you actually start to turn, or where would you need to stop your car? And the things to look out for here are cutting the corner or overshooting the junction. It's a common problem that actually when people are coming up to turn right and they possibly see some oncoming traffic and they think to themselves, I should probably stop for this one, but actually if I just turn a little bit early, I reckon I can nip round the corner and I can be away and I'm not going to have to stop and wait for them. And so they turn the corner a little bit early. What this means is that they cut the corner off as they turn. This gives us the obvious problem that as they turn the corner, if there is any vehicles or other traffic coming from the minor road, you, as you turn the corner, are completely cutting across the road right in front of them and potentially running the risk of a collision. Okay, so if you can see that you need to stop, don't try to cut the corner and go early. Just make sure you come to a stop and just be patient and sit and wait. Now, the other potential problem is overshooting the junction. And this, to a certain extent, happens for, I reckon, kind of two reasons. First one is that you get so fixated on the oncoming traffic and you're watching him and going, oh, there's a car coming, I need to wait for him, that you lose sight of where the junction is. And so you end up just kind of drifting past it. The other potential problem is that for a lot of novice drivers, I feel, they don't like stopping. Because once you've stopped your car, you've then got to find your biting point. You've got to find that tricky old biting point again, and then you've got to move off. And for a lot of novice drivers, that whole idea of getting the car moving can be quite nerve-wracking, because you're always worried about stalling the car as you move off. So you don't want to have to stop, get your biting point, and then possibly run the risk of stalling. So what I sometimes find is a lot of new drivers, when they're approaching and they can see that they probably need to stop, but in their heads they think, oh, I don't really want to stop because then I've got to do all of that stuff again. So they just keep on slowing down. They just trying to keep going as slowly as they possibly can, but without actually stopping. And again, what happens here is that instead of actually stopping at the point where you need to turn, you just keep gently edging that little bit further, and then by the time that car has gone past, you've gone 2 or 3 feet beyond where you should be turning, and this makes for a very awkward turn. So I know it can be a little bit nerve-wracking stopping, particularly if you're in traffic and you've got people waiting behind you, but much better just to make that decision. I need to stop, so I'm going to make sure I stop opposite the junction, or even, stop a foot early, stop that little bit further back, and just get yourself ready to go. Okay, and it avoids that kind of awkward overshooting of the junction and making it sort of a weird swan neck of a turn. Okay, and again, once you've made that turn, have a check of your mirrors, and away you go. Let's go and have a look at a couple. Okay, so I'm going to take the next turning on the right, just about where that red car is. So centre mirror, right mirror, signal on, squeezing the brake a little bit, bringing the speed down into second gear well before I get there, and clutch is up. I'm looking at the oncoming traffic. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to make it through, so I'm just eased off. I'm checking, make sure it's safe. My speed's down to 10, and round we go. Some mirrors, signal, squeezing my brake, can't really see, so I'm going to put the clutch down and go into first gear, just creeping out here, looking right and left as we emerge, making sure it's safe. Around we come. I'm going to take the next turning on the right, so centre mirror, right mirror, signal right. I'm already in the second, so I'm not going to change. I'm just going to ease off that gas, allow the pedestrians to cross the road. Looking for oncoming traffic, and it's nice and clear, so keeping my eye on the junction so I know when to turn, and around I go. Checking the mirror behind and accelerating into traffic. And then I'm going to take the next road on the right again, so centre mirror, right mirror, signal. bringing that speed down, change to second and clutch comes up. Looking ahead, there's no oncoming traffic, there's nobody at the junction, so I'm just looking into the road. I've got that blue car parked, so I'm just keeping it slow so I can look ahead, make sure it's safe before we come around. Check the mirrors, accelerate away, up into third gear. Okay, so hopefully that's helped with your procedures for approaching to turn left or right from major to minor junctions. Remember, one of the big problems I think that people have with making these major to minor turns, and you know, with any junction and roundabout, is not giving yourself enough time to deal with everything. So remember, it's quite important to make sure that you start your routine nice and promptly. Check your mirrors, you get your signal on, so try and avoid sort of checking your mirrors and then waiting for 2 or 3 seconds before you put your signal on, because those 2 or 3 seconds, that's distance that you're using up. You're approaching that junction and you're losing space, you're losing time to deal with it. So nice and prompt mirrors, as soon as it's safe, pop that signal on, get yourself onto the brakes so you've got plenty of time to slow yourself down. What you want to make sure is that you don't arrive at the junction still going too fast and suddenly have to brake. Make sure that you get yourself into second gear well before you get to the junction, 3 or 4 car lengths. You don't want to be arriving at the junction still fiddling about with your gears when in fact you need both hands on your wheel ready to make that turn. So just make sure once you know where the junction is and you can see where it is that you've got to turn, nice and prompt. Mirrors, signal, get your feet onto the pedal, slow your car down, give yourself time for a gear change into second, remembering get that clutch back up again, get control of the car, and then everything is fully under control, your speed is settled, and then when you arrive at the junction, all you've got to do is check to make sure it's safe and then make that turn. Okay, so thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.